Hi everybody. It's 6 o'clock Thursday. I'm sorry, not Thursday. It's Tuesday. Sorry about that. Turnaround Tuesday. Thank you for joining us tonight at 6 o'clock at our new time. We usually do this on Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock, but today we decided to do it at 6 o'clock because we've got a lot of requests to do it later in the evening. So I'm actually having some difficulty looking at the video. So give me a second. There we go. I just wanted to make sure I'm live so I can kind of take a look at you guys. Hi everybody, how are you guys doing? Welcome to our fourth Turnaround Tuesday. Like I said earlier, it's we're starting at 6 o'clock tonight instead of 10 o'clock in the morning. We got a lot of requests about trying to do it a little bit later in the evening, so we'll try it tonight at 6 o'clock to see how it kind of goes. This is our fourth Turnaround Tuesdays. The first week we talked about our jobs and laid out our jobs plan, and then we talked about education and film and television, and I think you saw how we announced our film and television film school last week. But we want to talk tonight about infrastructure and renewable energies. I think those are two important things that we have to take a look at. But before we start, I want to show you the headlines today from the Albuquerque New Mexican. Now we know the market bounced back a little bit, but in the last 2 days, the market has literally dropped about 8 points. And, and we know it's dropped about 8%. Now, the economy is strong everywhere except in New Mexico, and that's our goal, is to invest and turn New Mexico around so we can start investing back in New Mexico. But more importantly, 8% of the market dropped last week, in the last 2 days, in its value. When you take a look at the $23 billion that we have, if it's all invested into Wall Street, we believe we lost almost $1.9 billion of valuation. Now look, I'm sure the State Investment Council has our monies and our dollars invested in a lot better places or in other places, not just all there. And I'm sure there's stopgaps. But in the last 2 days, the market dropped 8 points, 8%, and we've lost probably a valuation of close to $1.9 billion. Now, even if we didn't lose the full valuation of 1.9, we're confident that it will come back, but we probably lost somewhere between $8 and $1 billion in the last 2 days. Now, we're confident that the market will come back, but that just gives you an example of how we've seen the State Investment Council and this governor invest our money, and yes, we've seen great increases. But I've been lobbying pretty hard for the last year, maybe year and a half, to get 15 to 20% of that money invested outside our state and invested back in our state. And as your governor, I'll invest 5% of that money back into New Mexico. Think about this. We lost probably $1 billion of valuation in the last 2 days. Think what that money could do if we invested it into New Mexico at low-debt finance loans that we had talked about in the past. And that's what we want to do. So as any private sector person or as any investor will tell you, that we literally always take some gains off growth, and let's invest it back into ourselves. The thing about Wall Street, the thing about investing outside New Mexico, that over 50% of New Mexicans don't invest into Wall Street, don't invest into stocks and bonds. And so we have to take that money and invest it into New Mexico for 225,000 new jobs, for new job opportunities and new job creation. So that's kind of what our game plan is, and that's what we'll be doing and talking about as we kind of move forward. Anyway, we're going to be talking today about infrastructure and agriculture. Infrastructure and renewable energies. Infrastructure. I looked at some statistics that we pulled up. The average New Mexican spends about $600 a year on repairing their cars because 26% of our roads are in poor conditions. Almost 10% of our bridges are in bad conditions, and it's time we start investing back into New Mexico. We know that our schools need over $400 million of infrastructure and infrastructure improvements. So we need to solve that. Our roads, we talked about our roads, and we take a look at our roads. We have literally, because our governor will not talk to our federal legislators, our U.S. senators, that our state has probably passed on close to $1 billion a year on infrastructure opportunities. Now we know, as your governor, there's almost over $400 million broadband infrastructure federal grants that we can go after to help us expand. Over 50% of our state doesn't have broadband. And then we wonder why our kids don't have job opportunities in telecommuting jobs and things like that. So that's what we're going to do, investing in our infrastructure. And those are important things for us to do. Now, we know we have to improve our roads, we know we have to improve our bridges, but think about this. Down in Carlsbad today, yes, we understand that the oil and gas industry is booming, and they've created almost 6,000 jobs in the last few years. But we now know that our roads are crumbling. We have 18-wheeler trucks around our state, literally transporting goods, transporting oil and gas, transporting our goods into our state on dangerous roads, putting our families and putting New Mexicans into danger. And then we sit on a sinkhole in Carlsbad, that if we went in today and we developed or we partnered and we could solve some of our problems for about $43 million today. That's the cost. But what's been going on for almost 30 years is we're pointing fingers and fighting back and forth about whose fault is it, who should solve the problem, who should pay for the problem. And here's my biggest concern, is that my wife and I and the kids were down in Carlsbad Caverns this last spring, and we literally drove over some of those roads that are warning that our families the sinkhole might expand and grow. Now, the engineers and the experts are telling us that sinkhole will continue to expand and grow. So it's not if there's a collapse, it's not if our school buses are driving over that road, it's when it's going to happen. So it's time we put our differences aside and we start, again, investing back into New Mexico, into infrastructure, and into those type of opportunities. That's what we want to talk about today. Now let's also talk about renewable energies. Renewable energies, we all know this, you've heard me talk about it for many times. We all talk about that we sit in a state next to Wyoming, we're ranked second in renewable energies capabilities between wind and sun. But we're ranked 48th in renewable energy production. And that's just crazy. So we have a plan that we're going to invest $1 billion, yes, $1 billion into renewable energies. And we can literally create solar cluster fields and wind fields today and create energy as low as 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt. And that's what our game plan is. And we will have enough energy to power with renewable energies to power not only New Mexico, but we can sell that energy at 11 to 18 cents a kilowatt to California, Nevada, Colorado. Now, 10 years ago, we probably couldn't have pulled this off. But today, we can do it in today's cost as we kind of move forward on that. So let me explain a little bit about renewables. So no, the state's not going to invest $1 billion of our $23 billion. We're going to invest some of it. But here's our plan. So we propose that we would invest $100 million into low debt finance loans of our money, of your money, into renewable energy cluster solar fields and wind. Then we would go to the federal government and we would work with our federal leadership and we would gain over $200 million of federal grants that we can invest into renewables. Now, as your governor, and I think it's going through the session today, as your governor, sorry guys, I just got a note real quick. I think we're having some technical difficulties with our camera. We'll try and, I think maybe I'm hitting the table a little bit. We'll try not to bounce the table. So I'll stay off the table a little bit if we're getting bouncing around. So I apologize on that. So let's go back to renewables. So $100 million from New Mexico, $200 million from the federal government. But my point is there's $1 trillion, according to the Wall Street Journal, looking to invest in low debt finance loans into renewable energies. I have talked to 2 companies in California, 1 in Florida, and I just met a new company that's based in El Paso, based in the southern part of Texas, that also does business in Mexico. And they have billions of dollars and they're looking to invest in renewable energies. So my proposal is let's partner with them. You're going to hear collaboration from us a lot. Let's partner with them together and let's create state and federal partnerships with the private sector on renewable energies. And as your governor, we're going to push for renewable energy credits for your houses and for businesses and for our schools. I think that's a great opportunity. But what we need to do is we need to invest and think bigger. Remember, our campaign's about big ideas, about new ideas. Look, we can't continue to do the same things over and over. We have to start looking at new ideas and big ideas. And we sit literally in the second best state for solar and wind. And then folks, if you don't know this, the infrastructure of our grids literally run right through New Mexico. So we can tap onto the bandwidth. In the northern New Mexico, right up by Taos, there's plenty of bandwidth that we can literally tap into, not only help power New Mexico and power our rural communities, but we can send that energy at 4 cents a kilowatt to California, Arizona, and Nevada. And we can send it to other states. And then we can sell it at wholesale at 11 to 18 cents a kilowatt a year. 11 to 18 cents a kilowatt. So again, creating revenues and revenue streams for the state of New Mexico. And that's what we have to do. It's that simple. It's that simple. And yes, if you look at Texas, Texas is an oil and gas state. Guess who their number one investors in is the renewable energies. And that's what we'll do as you're waiting for it. Anyway, looks like we have a lot of people tonight. I really appreciate everybody joining us. I'm going to go to questions right now because it's really important that we need to work with the federal government. We need to reach out and get that $1 billion a year of federal grants. One of the things that I've talked to our U.S. senators about is, up in Washington right now, they're proposing a $1.5 trillion infrastructure plan. I want to make sure as your governor that we're reaching out and making sure that New Mexico is getting their share of infrastructure and infrastructure investments. So that's what we're going to talk about. So let's go to some questions right off the bat. And we got the first hot one. And clearly, I see Ted. We got something written here from Ted. And he says, would you invest into programs like ART that you did in Albuquerque, or that Albuquerque did? It's kind of funny. We get these kind of questions every once in a while. There's a couple things. One, let's talk about the spaceport, because that comes up, number one, and we'll talk about ART in a second, but the spaceport. Now look, as your governor, I don't know if I'd have invested $100 million into the spaceport, because that comes up a lot. But what we have done is we've invested $100 million in the spaceport. So what can we do to expand the spaceport and grow the economy? Now folks, we live in the third, one of the top 3 areas for launching rockets into outer space. So there's no reason we should not be in the satellite business. And that will grow opportunities for New Mexicans. Now we have to invest into infrastructure for those opportunities. Now let's go back to ART. I really appreciate the question, ART. Now, I'm not against mass transit, and I think mass transit's very important. But to spend $122 million, because that's what it was, and by the way, the ART project, when I first heard about it, it was starting at $80 to $90 million, and now it's gone up to $122 million. So in New Mexico, or in Albuquerque, I'm not against mass transit. In fact, I think mass transit is very important. But the ART project we took a look at here in Albuquerque, the ART project runs down Central, and in reality, most of the traffic is on the west side and the east side of Albuquerque. So if you live in Albuquerque, where they put in ART, it really doesn't solve some of our traffic problems. So as your governor, I will invest into infrastructure. I will invest into ART type of programs as long as it's fighting traffic or developing traffic or solutions for small businesses and commuters for the future to come. So that's the things we would kind of do. How's that? We got another question from Bobby. It looks like he's from down south. What are some of the first infrastructure projects you'll fund? Well, I think we talked about it. I think the first thing we need to invest into is roads. Look, between I-25 and I-40, we have tons of trucks moving back and forth. And one of the things we have been talking to is we've been talking to Colorado and Mexico and creating, by the way, we're not going to promote promote walls. We're going to promote bridges and develop partnerships with Mexico. So one of the conversations we're having between Colorado, New Mexico, and New Mexico is we need to start investing together on infrastructure, on railroad infrastructure, and on road infrastructure to basically start exporting and importing from Mexico. Now we know Colorado's, one of the top Colorado's exports is Mexico. And they send most of their stuff through Phoenix and Arizona. So our proposal is we have Santa Teresa right down south, so we should be investing into that. So we know our industries and we know that our roads need major help within those. So that's where we would invest. And again, I have been told, because some of our political leaders will not talk to each other, from the roundhouse to our U.S. senators, our governor has probably passed on close to $1 billion of federal funding almost annually for our roads. And I think that's hurt our economy. I think that's hurt our opportunities. So that's what we're going to take a look at, doing that too. So thank you, Bobby, for that question right there. We have a second question from Claire. Will you support more state-of-the-art classroom facilities for our kids with some infrastructure dollars? Yes, in fact, I think we talked about that earlier. And 2 weeks ago, we talked about our education. And we do agree that we probably underfund over $600 million in federal funding in our state. So I think what we need to do is take a look at that. Now, schools. According to what we've looked at, we need capital expenditures of about $400,000 worth of schools. Again, folks, we can't grow our economy, we can't grow our state if we're not investing into infrastructure, if we're not investing into ourselves. And we've looked at budgets, and we have seen, we talked about education, how we're going to move 8% of PED's budget back into the schools, but infrastructure, most of our schools, not most of our schools, but some of our schools, over $400 million of our schools, need infrastructure and need improvements. And we have to start looking at that. We have to start looking at state-of-the-art schools and opportunities. So those are areas that we would invest in too. And again, we have capital outlay projects every year. Now, the capital outlay money has been tight the last couple of years because of budget crunch on the operational side. But we feel we can work with our U.S. senators to go after $1 billion of federal grant dollars. And now, with this $1.5 trillion infrastructure plan, we have talked to our U.S. senators and our Congress folks about how we can fight and get New Mexico's share down here and invest into that. So Clara, I hope I answered your question. I'm kind of trying to scroll through here so I can see it, but I see my team over here kind of getting questions. And we got 2 more questions right here. Actually, we got a 3rd question. This is from John. John, what about solar for the schools? John, that's a great question. Solars for schools, yes. We talked about solar energy, and one of our plans is yes, we're going to build those big grids. But our goal is to create tax credits, not only for our schools, but for individuals and stuff like that. So again, we have looked at plans that we would invest into solar into our schools, and I think we can cut almost 65% of energy costs to our schools on the average school, and that money would actually go right back to our classrooms. So John, I think that's a great question, and yes, I think we work. And by the way, there are 3 solar companies in New Mexico that are very strong, and again, we're all about local preference. We have talked to most of them. We still continue to have conversations with them, and we just need to come up with funding to make sure that we create solar. But again, if we invest into solar, we invest into those opportunities, it will lower cost, and we can save almost 35–40% of our solars to our schools, and that's more money back into our schools. So John, I hope I answered your question. James asked, who gets that $18 a kilowatt? Well, James, that's a very good question. Actually, the goal is the goal would be 1/3 of it the state. So let's talk about the partnership. So our proposal is $1 billion investment into renewable energies, into cluster solar fields or wind fields, right? And yes, we would lower costs for all New Mexicans, but the excess cost, we can ship it to to California, Arizona, and Nevada. Now keep in line, between the Zia project down south and then the San Juan project, and even in Taos, we have the bandwidth and the power lines that go literally to the West Coast and go right through Arizona. Now, we believe that most of the demand is going to be during the demand months in those states, which are usually between August and September. June through September will be those demand months. Now, when you look at California's rate on wholesale, basically they're buying wholesale between 11 and 18 cents a kilowatt. We can develop it in today's world between solar and wind between 3 and 4 cents a kilowatt. Now, our partnership is, what we look at is, we would invest 1/3 between state and federal grants, or state and federal funding, and then we would partner with, and I believe we should collaborate together with the P&Ms of the world and work with them, because they own the grids and they can manage it. And then we talked about private sector that wants to come in and invest with us in low-debt finance loans. And then the infrastructure will be built by local New Mexico businesses. Now, the reason I want to invest into that as your governor is because I don't want to just charge rates off state land or federal land. We need revenue streams. So our goal is being a third of the partner is when we start making that money. So when you're making the 60-80% return on the money, you're going to have to give a chunk of that to the private sector, the private investors, give a chunk of that to the companies that are running it, but then also give a third of that to the state of New Mexico. And again, keep revenue streams coming in the state. So James, I hope I answered your question, but it's basically a partnership, a collaboration, and yes, the goal is a third of those profits would come back to the state as additional revenue streams for our school, for our state and for our schools. That's what we're kind of looking at that. We have one more question. John would like to invest in making our schools more community-based and involved in parents and sports. Well, I think we have a teacher that's asking questions because we got another question from John. So John, I think those are two good questions. And we actually talked about that last week, or 2 weeks ago actually, with our education. And I'll just summarize it very quickly. Yes, we believe in community schools. We believe going from the community up. So our educational plan is from the community up, not top down. I think we've proven that that PED is it doesn't work, right? Top down doesn't work. So we talked about it 2 weeks ago. And John, I would ask you to go to our Facebook Live from 2 weeks ago, and we actually laid out our educational plan that shows you that and talks about that. And then I believe we posted our educational plan on our website. So go to apo18.com, apo18.com, and take a look at that. Now we're about 25 minutes in. We have decided to keep most of these to about 30 minutes. We do have one more question that I'll take right now, and then if you have any more questions, I'm kind of trying to cruise through this. But if you have any more questions, please send in your questions before we go off. We've got about 6 more minutes that we'll stay on. But Alan, and I'm not really sure what part of the state Alan is from, what will you do to help the northern part of our state with, well, I guess she's from the northern part of the state. What would you do to help the northern part of our state in regards to infrastructure? I know Albuquerque needs investments too, but I want to see funds coming up to the north as well. Alan, that's a great question. In fact, between capital outlay and some of our investments we're talking about, now keep in mind our investment into infrastructure is going to be all over the state, but our rural communities need it the best. And you are correct, specifically up north. Between the acequias that we need to make sure they're stable and they're strong for our agriculture. And next week we're going to talk about agriculture, and we'll talk about more about how we're going to invest into agriculture and grow job opportunities there. But you are correct. Our roads are falling apart, specifically in northern New Mexico. Our construction, and in fact the sad thing is, Jackie and I and the boys, we were campaigning up north, and then we were kind of traveling around up north campaigning, and we took the weekend off and went to Durango, and everybody always jokes about how the roads are in Colorado and how they invest into infrastructure. On the way back on that Sunday, we crossed the line and our truck started vibrating. We started moving up and down. Jackie made a joke with me, literally thinking that I was trying to hit all the potholes. So we see how that infrastructure is struggling. One of the things that saddened me more than anything else, as a father, as a person in New Mexico that sees the highest unemployment in the country, is we did see some road work. And once again, New Mexico is patching and Band-Aid strategy of patching these things up, and so our roads up. And the more distressful thing I would say is when I saw that, when I pulled over, we talked to some of the construction workers building the roads. Those teams were from Colorado. We have stopped, going back to education a little bit, right? Because education goes everywhere. We have stopped training our kids in trade skills and skilled workers. And that's what we want to do as we move forward, because we have to start investing back into New Mexico. We right now, if you go up north, you see a lot of the road crews basically from Colorado. You go down south, they're from Texas or from Arizona. It's time we start investing into our own kids to give them the tools and the sets and do the work here and start investing back into that. Now within the northern part of New Mexico, a lot of our investments within the infrastructures, not only our roads, our bridges, but our sequias, because as we talk more about tourism down the road, as we talk more about agriculture, it's very, very important that we continue to move forward on those areas to protect those communities too as we move forward. Let me see something. I'm kind of cruising through this. Did we get all the questions, or any more questions that I might have missed? Shay? That's it? Okay. I see one from James. Definitely need more skilled trade opportunities. Yes, James, and we basically talked about that. I think we talked about more trade skills. That's more on our educational platform. But look, we're going to wrap it up because we're 27 minutes into it. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I know it's probably not the most exciting topic, but it's really important that we start diversifying our economy and start investing back into New Mexico. And you're going to hear me talk about that. It's time we start investing into new ideas, big changes, opportunities for New Mexico. And that's what we have to do. We sit on $23 billion. And you saw it in the last 2 days. The market dropped 8 points. And so I'm sure the State Investment Council, we didn't lose 8% of our value. But even if we lost half of that, that's almost $1 billion of valuation that we lost. Think about that being invested into small businesses, into agriculture, into infrastructure, job creation, education. That's what we're talking about. So I thank you all for coming tonight, and I thank you all for being here tonight. And that's what that's what our campaign's about. Keep following us on Facebook. Keep following us at apo18.com. Next week, we'll take a look at it. We'll analyze, is 10 o'clock in the morning better or 6 o'clock in the evening better? We'll take a look at it, but we'll make sure we're promoting it and giving you guys opportunities to come in and tag. But please, send us questions. Next week, we're going to be talking about agriculture. But also, we've saved these videos on our website and on our Facebook page, and we've laid out our jobs plan. We've laid out our educational plan. We've talked about infrastructure and renewable energies. Next week, we're going to talk about agriculture and how we can grow agriculture. So I ask you to tune in next week. Please send in your questions at info@apo18.com or follow us on Facebook. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you guys next week. We'll see you on the campaign trail. God bless.